Aloha nui kako. Mahalo nui everyone for joining us this morning. We're so excited that you folks have taken the time out of your busy lives to be here today. My name is Kavehi Young, and I am the Community Engagement Liaison at the Big Island Invasive Species Committee. This is the second webinar in our speaker series for the Natural Environment Resilience Capacity Area for Revitalized Puna, The purpose of this speaker series is to highlight the work that folks are doing on the ground to restore and protect the natural environment of Puna. Before I introduce today's speaker, I just want to go over some housekeeping items first. First and foremost, please make sure that you are muted so that we can avoid any interruptions during the presentation. As any questions arise, please feel free to type your questions into the chat and we will address those at the end of the talk. This webinar is being recorded and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel, hopefully by next week. And we do have a few more webinars lined up in the coming months, so please be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram or sign up for our e-newsletter to stay up to date on the details for those events. All right, now let's get started. I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker, Kalena Blakemore. Kalena is the Legacy Land Management Specialist at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Her education and background are primarily in art, anthropology, and archaeology. Her previous 10 years were spent at Hawaiʻi Volcanoes National Park as an archaeologist, mapping and monitoring caves, as well as other varied cultural resource management projects. This work led Kalena back to graduate school to write a master's thesis, Na Ki'ila'au, The Gods and Guardians of Pu'uhonua o Honaunau in 2017. For oral history interviews from descendants of Honaunau, information on the Ki'ila'au carvers and 4 major Hawaiian gods represented at the Pu'uhonua and Haleokeawe are revealed. Kalena's community service work includes serving her second term on the Hawaii Island Burial Council, representing the district of Puna. Her professional aspirations are to establish an infrastructure at Wao Kele o Puna, which supports the natural and cultural ecosystems of the forest reserve. These include watershed protection, feasible forest restoration, protection of rare and endangered species, removal of invasive species, community stewardship, recreational experiences, and educational space for connecting with the natural environment. All of these goals are determined, of course, in accordance with Tutupele's eruptions. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Kalena. Mahalo.
Thank you, Kavehi, and aloha, mai kako, mahalo nui everybody for tuning in today. I'm happy to share this time and space with you. First of all, I want to say Wao Kele o Puna is not the name, a place name of this forest, but it's more of a descriptive name that's a historic name. That was, it's a modern name that we tried to look for the original names with our ethno-historical study, and we were unable to find the original place name area. The forest is located between the ahupua'a of Waikahi'ula and Ka'ohe in Puna, a Mokuokeawe. It lies between the ahupua'a of Kamoamoa and Keonipoko and sits in the East Rift zone of Kilauea volcano. It's approximately 10 miles from Hilo and 10 miles from Halema'uma'u, with Pu'u'o'o just 2.5 miles upslope. It encompasses just under 26,000 acres, roughly the size of the island of Hawaii. Wao Kele is designated a State Forest Reserve, State Conservation Protective Subzone. This is the highest level for protection by the Land Use Commission. Wao Kele is recognized as the first ceded lands to return to Hawaiian hands since the overthrow of the kingdom in 1893. It also is recognized as the largest intact tropical lowland rainforest in the United States. The elevation of our forest ranges from 1,000 to 2,280 feet. Typically, koa grows best between 2,000 and 6,000, and native birds are typically found above 3,000. Rainfall is approximately 110 to 150 inches per year with no standing surface water. Lava flows range from oldest from 3,000 years. The last large flow was 2007, impacting 1,500 acres, with the most recent at Wao Kele in 2014. The property was acquired in 2006 by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, who paid $300,000 of the $3.65 million purchase price, leaving the remaining balance that was paid by the Federal Forest Legacy Program. The property was managed under an MOA for 10 years by DLNR from 2006 to 2016 when the MOA expired. So now at this point, we are assuming full responsibility, OHA, of the forest management of the conservation land. The acquisition objectives are to protect natural and cultural resources, to protect traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians on the parcels, and assures that land will pass to the Lahui. For some background history, Wao Kele Puna Forest Reserve is part of the 1.5 million acres of Crown and Hawaiian Kingdom lands that were first confiscated from Native Hawaiians and then ceded to the U.S. government in 1898. Once Hawaii became a state, the lands became part of the ceded Public Lands Trust, managed by Hawaii's Department of Land and Natural Resources on behalf of the Native Hawaiians and the general public. Prior to being opened up for energy development, the Wao Kele Puna Rainforest was a natural reserve set aside to protect native plants and animals. As part of the ceded Public Lands Trust, it was legally dedicated to the use of the Hawaiian people in perpetuity. In 1985, this land was approved for development through a state-organized land swap with the Campbell Estate. More than 27,000 acres of public trust land in the Puna Forest Reserve were traded by the DLNR for 25,000 acres of adjacent private land at Kaha'olaulea. In March 1990, approximately 1,500 people peacefully demonstrated and opposed the geothermal project and land trade for many reasons. This, at the time, was the largest protest we'd ever had in the state of Hawaii, and then now the TMT protest. So in the end, 141 people were arrested. In the Pele Defense Fund versus Patty 1992, PDF primarily argued that the exchange constituted a breach of the trust created of the Hawaiian Admission Act and Article 12, Section 4 of the Hawaii Constitution. PDF also argued that the exchange violated Article 12(7) of the Hawaii Constitution, traditional and customary rights for Native Hawaiians. In the end, Pele Defense did win their case. What makes Wao Kele special is it's one of the few remaining tracts of lowland rainforest in Hawaii and the U.S. The reserve is a watershed recharge. Wao Kele lies over 20% of the largest aquifer in the state, the Pohoa Aquifer. It provides habitat for endangered species and a seed bank, kipuka. Wao Kele is a sacred place to Native Hawaiians for traditional and customary practices. It is the home to the goddess Pele and an intersecting point with Kane, the god of water. This forest is home to several mo'olelo, or stories, affiliated with Pele, Hi'iaka, her sister, Kamapua'a, and Aila'au. Cultural resources found here include extensive lava tubes with sensitive archaeological sites and burials. In 2015, our first community working group was assembled to inform our comprehensive management plan, the CMP. They would meet monthly for 2 years before we had our document finalized. The plan is our guide for forest management and was approved in 2017. The group was composed of cultural practitioners, educators, scientists, conservation and restoration activists. A few of these members were also arrested in the geothermal protest. Auntie Renee Siracusa has since passed away, but her legacy remains, and OHA holds much gratitude for the contribution to this original group. The document is approximately 1,000 pages. It's really an interesting document, even though that number sounds daunting. You can find it on our OHA website under Aina, Wao Kele Puna link, and it has many reports and appendices that put together the compilation. It's quite fascinating. So since the approval of our CMP, some of the pre-pandemic activities that we had from 2017 to 2020. We have hosted monthly community engagement days with private and public school groups. Ke Kula o ka Navahi o Kaleni o Pu'u, Kamehameha Summer School programs, Ke Au Pahoa Complex schools. The students that come to our property practice natural and cultural management protocols and are exposed to Hawaiian place-based learning through mo'olelo, kilo, observations, aloha aina, which include weeding and outplanting, seed collecting, and propagation. Due to the Conservation Protective Subzone designation, we have to seek exemptions from SHIP D, or State Historic Preservation Department, and OCCL, the Office of Coastal and Conservation Lands, for any projects that we want to accomplish. So this was sort of a big deal, even though it might look small to you guys, especially for the size of our property, but just to get our fences put up, small fence units, and our signage, we had to get exemptions from OCCL. Current projects right now, we have in our burner in 2020, the deal in our land division provided OHA with a right of entry from the Kalena Black Sand subdivision, allowing us access to a remote point in the reserve that is home to rare plants and possible seabirds and bats. The highlight of 2022 in support of rare and endangered plant and animal species is a large grant award we received from Fish and Wildlife Service. The grant includes funding for 2 years to install a 17-acre fence unit and undulate removal within the unit, also rare plant collection, propagation, and restoration within the fenced unit. This spring, DOFA staff installed song meters to survey the Newell shearwater, A'o, and Ope'apea. They will be collecting the instruments in August for analysis. In the 1990s, a survey was conducted at Pu'uheheahulu, and A'o were recorded nesting there. So we have high hopes that maybe we'll be able to record them again now as a follow-up. We have plans to conduct a comprehensive plant survey to inventory and collect for propagation with DOFA and the Plant Extinction Prevention Program staff, and utilize Volcano Rare Plant Facility in assisting us with the propagation of these plants. In 2020, after approval from OCCL, we installed a 3-acre fence exclosure. It's adjacent to the former geothermal drill site for easy access. The unit is invaded with Viv, and we're looking at utilizing the hybrid ecosystem novel forestry model designed by Lika na Palina project, which is directed by Susan Cordell and Becky Ostertag. This unit will also be used for rare plant restoration with species found at Wao Kele o Puna. This past legislation session, our House Representative, Gregor Iligan, included us in his CIP for Puna projects. He actually approached us and came out to do a site visit and ask us what we need and how he could help serve our community in Puna. And so we gave him a tour and put together an ask with our site plan. We didn't get the funding, but this is what we want and we need and we envision. So you can see one of the maps there. Is an environmental toilet like what they have at Kaho'olave, a small greenhouse for our keiki to practice propagating, an open pavilion where we can meet with our kapuna and education groups, an open walled pavilion, and a small gravel parking area to serve our community during stewardship and educational engagement days. And so that is our site plan up there, right there. We also at some point want to build Kau hale, a more traditional hale for a meeting place, but we wanted to put something in that was more durable and long-lasting. So that's why we're going to go with a more regular functional pavilion. We face several challenges with management at Wao Kele, but our major challenge is access. The size of our property, the size of the reserve, the vast amount of invasive species, the unpredictable volcanic activity. This map depicts the various forest management units categorized by how invaded the property is. You can see the difficulty in reaching the more high conservation units in green. So those little green patches are high conservation units that are more pristine, and then the red is highly invasive, The yellow is also invasive. So most of our property is very invaded, and we have very few access points to get in there and remove invasive species or nurture and take care of the green high conservation areas. Currently, we have 2 pedestrian access points and 1 vehicle access road. The upper north access is approached from Eden Rock. Actually, it's not north, I think it's south. From Eden Rock and Fern Forest. The terrain is really difficult, and trails are being created to access the deeper forest to remove Myconia. We have our Forest Solutions as our contractor, and they go in through that way for part of the contract to clear the trails to get to Myconia. This area is also dangerous for our contractors at times due to the neighborhood community that have concerns with outsiders and contractors. The middle road from Ka'ohe Homestead provides access to the 5-acre clearing or the former geothermal drill site. This area is easy for community to enter but heavily invaded, and the terrain outside of the road is extremely hazardous. There is also a locked gate requiring a formal request for the gate key and liability waivers to be signed before access can be granted through the gate with opening the gate. There's a pedestrian entrance for day hikers and hunters, so you can walk through on your own, and that little yellow rectangle on that slide is the 5-acre clearing, former geothermal site. The last access is through a DLNR parcel on the upper Puna Road, which puts us very near to Pu'uhehe Hulu. And though it works and functions for us, it's not an access point for just regular public community members. We strive to maintain our networks and relationships with various agencies to assist with managing the reserve and serving our beneficiaries. Three Mountain Alliance, DOFA and PEP, the Nature Conservancy, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, UH Institute of Pacific Islands Forestry, our new Ahakaia'ulu Working Group, Kamehameha Schools, Hawaii Academy of Arts and Science, Keonipoko Elementary, Kekula Navahi, Okalani Opu'u. We also have MOUs with USGS HVO and U.S. Forest Service for access and research. I'm all by myself here. I'm the only one that works in land for this property, so we rely heavily on our partnerships and collaborations, and I always welcome and look forward to us being able to work together so we can share the resources that are varied amongst the different agencies. So getting back to the forest, this April and May, because we've been on a hiatus because of the pandemic, we haven't had any school groups, but this April and May, the Estria Foundation sponsored a mele mural project at Keonipoko Elementary School, and we got a call from an Ahakaia'ulu member asking if they could bring the haumana to Wao Kele for inspiration, because the kids didn't have a theme yet for what they wanted to paint. This was our first group we hosted after the pandemic closed our forest to community engagement events. We had 29 students, then their school staff, maybe 4 or 5 of the staff, 2 artists from Estria Foundation come for this day, one of which is our talented lead artist, Nainoa Rosehill, who was born and raised in Puna. His grandfather also lived at Ka'ohe Homestead land, so it was a homecoming for him, and he was our lead artist. The keiki spent time in kilo observations on the lava flow. They painted signs for the forest, they outplanted and cleared weeds. Before their lunch, they were led in meditation to reflect and develop their theme for the mural. Pele and her brothers were predominant in their reflections of the migration to Hawaii from Kahiki. The theme echoes their personal experiences, the children of Puna, embracing people from all regions and being home to everyone, because many of the students at Keonipoko aren't native Hawaiian but come from different places. So this mural was sort of to provide this a home base for them to know that all are welcome in Puna. We have formed a new Ahakaia'ulu working group. This is just a small portion of our people. This last Saturday we met for the first time. Not all of us could attend, but the small group consists of subject matter experts in various management activities in natural and cultural resources. We have cultural practitioners, educators, botanists, hunters, and hula practitioners This working group will assist with community input for projects and management at the reserve. It is hopeful that these people will help guide any kind of community projects. We don't yet have a hunting policy, and so we have one hunter here is represented, who is the president of the hunting game committee here on our island, and we have many plant experts there. We see Jaya and Kobsa and Malia Gooden now, and we have some of our cultural practitioners from Kalapana, Auntie Lori, and her husband Chemo. Anyway, it was a really fun day, and this is just our small group along with Forest Solutions, our contractor. So I just want to mahalo Forest Solutions, DLNR, Land, DOFA, the Nature Conservancy, Three Mountain Alliance, Fish and Wildlife Service, our Puna Ahakaya Ulu Working Group for Sharing in Aloha Aina at Wao Kele, and Big Island Invasive Species Committee for allowing us to share our updates. Mahalo nui. And I don't know how long I took, but I'm open to any questions that you may have or comments that you might have. I hope you have some. Thank you. And Kavehi, the person that can transmit the questions for me. Thanks, Kavehi.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that presentation and just sharing all of the amazing work and research and everything going on at Wao Kele o Puna. I see we have one question so far from Zoe. She asks, how can we support or contribute?
Hi, that's wonderful. I think we might have a few nonprofits that we have connected with in our Ahakaya Ulu group. I believe, depending on what your expertise is, we have Malama o Puna, which Auntie Renee used to be the director for, and I think Ann Kobsa now is the director. Also, I would just connect with some of the nonprofits, and if they have a project they want to put forth, then we can go through and see what kind of grants might, present that we could use for particular projects. What we'd really like to see in long term is areas where our community might feel take on and adopt a plot, adopt a site. Like if you are a hula halau, that maybe you can adopt a site that can be fenced, and then you can malama that site. You can plant hula plants for that you might need for your dancing, or you could also see community supported agriculture, where we have small farmers and small farms where food is grown for the community. So I think, thank you for the question, Zoe. I don't have an immediate answer, but definitely joining up with one of the nonprofits like Malama o Puna. Also, Iopa Mauna Kea is one of our cultural practitioners, and he runs his nonprofit. I think it's called Men of Pa'a, where they are men that are coming out of incarceration and doing a lot of Malama Aina and stewardship work. So depending on what you enjoy and what you want to put forth might be what determines what nonprofit you might seek to reach out to that's in our group.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then I did post that link to the Wao Kele o Puna Comprehensive Management Plan on the OHA website. So that is in the chat if you folks want to check that out.
Thank you.
We have one more question from William. Is there a plant, tree, invasive, and bird survey that can be made available? So I think that's in reference to a lot of the research that's going on from your different partners.
Absolutely. I would go into our CMP because I believe we have like 10 appendices, and they cover all kinds of topics like fire management, geothermal feasibility, invasive species. There's a beautiful biological report that was produced in by DLNR, Julie Lealoha, with maps. I think BISC did a lot of contributions into our report to the CMP. So even though it's a bit daunting, just hit the CMP and download it. And 500 of those pages are the ethno-historical study. So for those of you who are curious about culture at Wao Kele, that is a really phenomenal to to look at for cultural information. But yeah, the CMP will have those with good maps.
I think on your first slide, you had your email listed. If you could just rewind back to that slide, just in case anyone wants to send you an email.
There you go.
Awesome.
Kalena.
Thank you. And if anybody has any more questions, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm open. I know that was probably a quick presentation, and I know some people might have wanted more details, like how much road work is opened up, how many trails are being created. Right now, we contract with Forest Solutions, and they mow the roadway, the Olson easement, and our road into this to the 5 acre clearing, and are cutting trails that they can get to. But it's such a large property. It's not like the national park where we have a huge crew and staff that can go out and hit it hard. And we have very limited funding to nothing.
Do you know how often Forest Solutions is hiring?
They actually put a big call out a few months ago because they were shorthanded, and really I would just go and apply because I think there's always openings. And yeah, they just hired a few people, but definitely I would go and look at their website for solutions and then employment opportunities. And they work all over the island too, actually in our whole state, not just Hawaii, but Maui and
Melissa,
uh,
you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Kalena, for sharing about this project. It's funny, Kalena and I are neighbors, and this is the most I've learned about her work so far. Um, I, it's probably in the management plan, but without looking at it currently, are you able to share a little bit about like perhaps different areas that are planned for different kinds of uses?
well, that is one of our big problems because we are a conservation protective subzone. If you look it up in the Land Use Commission, there's pretty much nothing we can do in the property unless we get it rezoned. And in our CMP, that was a suggestion. Peter Young wrote our CMP that we should go to the Land Use Commission and have it rezoned as a special subzone. So that's one thing I can try to do. The other is also to go before the Board of Land and Natural Resources and have them approve our CMP and recognize it as approved, and that would also reduce some of the restrictions for us. So right now it's access. We can't get to any of the places unless we use a helicopter, which is super expensive, which we may end up having to do in some of those green units just to get out there and to put some fence around it and then keep them more pristine. But right now we are only working off of our 5 acre clearing and along the roadside because it's dangerous. There's the first picture. Let me go back. You can see that big crack here. There's a number of huge geologic cracks at Wao Kele that make it so dangerous for people to go out. And we have a few of those cracks. That's just one of them. So we're limited by hazards. Another thing too, Melissa, is because the volcano is always erupting, for us to put a lot of money and time into restoration in an area that might get flowed over again, we have to think about stuff like that. So we do have our pu'u and our fence project that's higher up. So hopefully if there isn't another flow, it'll be diverted around the pu'u and not affect the seed bank that we have and the rare and endangered species. But yeah, right now we don't have firm designated areas where we're going to be doing restoration. But
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious because you talked about this, doing CSAs and like small farms, and I was curious about like how that might fit into the mosaic of the landscape.
We're looking at, I mean, we'd like to really procure that lot that we've got right now for access through from the Kalapana side. And that's a 55-acre parcel, and it's an ag parcel. And so in my visioning, that is a place that I think would be really good for a CSA without having to remove any trees. The other area also, if you ever want to go on a field trip, let me know. I can take you out, is at the 5-acre clearing. If you look at the geothermal picture, you can see this is the overview of the 5-acre clearing, and there's this huge reservoir that they dug for the water to cool the system. And so this whole area is clear now, and we have that reservoir area, we have to mow it, but we're also thinking this might be a good area too for growing vegetables and food plants. So this is one small area we're thinking would be viable for farming and vegetables and food.
Thank you.
And then Tina had her hand up. So go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I have a couple questions. So is Forest Solutions a web page?
Forest Solutions has a site, so you can go to their site and see all their projects and see who their staff are and even if they're hiring, yeah.
Okay, I was going to pass it on to family on Maui and around Hawaii in case they're interested. And then my other question is I know someone who does specialty drone work in Hawaii. Would that be something, who would he contact if you wanted to have some drone work done over the property?
Well, right now we have had TNC come forward and do some drone work for us because we were trying to identify a particular lolu plant to see if it was a rare lolu. So we had those guys come out, and Forest Solutions also had a drone expert too in their crew. So he
Okay.
and I think even some of their current crew can fly drones also. So
Oh, very good. I just wanted to check. Okay, that was all I wanted to ask. Thank
thanks,
you.
Tina.
All right. And then William wants to know if you can talk more about how to get students involved.
Well, we haven't gone from the students. Usually it's teachers who have like a program, like, or they'll come to us and say, like the Estria Foundation, the Mele mural. I think the vice principal called her cousin and said, how can we get into the forest? And because I work with them and it's Auntie Emily Naiole's niece, and Auntie Emily was also serving on our Aha Kuka Council. These are just people, Kuaina people from Puna that just call and just say, we have this program, or KS approached us and said they're doing their ho'olauna, Puna, and they wanted to bring their keiki haumana into the forest. So we would work with them, and Forest Solutions would be the ones that would bring them in and host them and provide the plants and the gloves and area that's safe for them to work in. So I think just reach out to me, and then I'll work with you, and we can work with Forest Solutions if you want to design a huaka'i for a particular class. William, that would be fine.
He also followed up with a comment. It seems to me that OHA could put in place a covered site on the 5-acre tract to house teams of workers who want or need to stay on site for surveys and work. Is there a plan for a field camp?
Well, I wouldn't call it a field camp, but in our CMP, let me go back to that page. What we're looking to do, here's a overview map, a site plan map. So that rectangular shape there is the 5-acre clearing. And some of those little boxes, one of them is a pavilion, an open walled pavilion that we would like to install so that we can have a staging area or an area for meeting with people. And after that is in place, we also want to build like a traditional kauhale setting. We want to put in an environmental toilet here, and then a small gravel parking area. So this is a good place for us to be doing our community engagement. And we have sponsored some trainings with USGS HVO drone training a couple of months ago, and they staged there. They didn't necessarily camp, but they did come every day and do their work. And so, yeah, that area is being thought of and utilized for access and for research and for training.
We had another question. Does BISC work overlap with the property? And I had just texted my boss, Franny, because I didn't know. But we used to do a lot of myconia work before Forest Solutions took over that contract. Is that right, Kalena?
Yes, I believe so. But BISC, we do work with BISC. I mean, because I'm in the ROD working group,
Mm-hmm.
our fellows, I think it's Dustin Swan.
Yes.
You know, I think just to be invited to the table and collaborate with those guys and um, tell them, oh, I was on the helicopter and it looks like the rod is diminishing on our property. And so then immediately Dustin did a flight with a couple more of his people over our property to confirm and do surveys. So we are always beneficiaries of BISC and, you know, DOFA employees. They're the ones that come out and help us put out surveys and do surveys and yeah, do some data recovery and research. Definitely, BISC is right there with us.
All right. Does anybody have any more questions? This is really great, Kalena. Mahalo for joining us today and talking about all the work that you do. This is really important work. And, you know, we have to be able to connect to these spaces and love these places and have these roots in order to really care and become stewards. So, mahalo.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And people can reach out to me if they saw my email address. They can send me a question if they have or if they need some information or access.
Yeah, mahalo everyone for joining us today. I think we're gonna close it out, and I'll be posting this webinar on our YouTube channel. So subscribe to the BISC YouTube channel if you haven't already. That's where we post all of these webinars.